What's up, everybody? It's waba, and I want to take a little bit of time to talk about Siege Ballista in 3.0 for Path of Exile. Now, as I know, we have a lot of newer players. If you haven't seen my previous Siege Ballista video, I will link in the description below. But it was a champion elemental Siege Ballista build using the unique item Iron Commander. Now, this item has had a lot of ups and downs in how the community views it. I think people don't think it, or don't recognize it's as strong as it actually is right now. And there's been a lot of changes that makes it even better. And I'm going to go through them in this video. But the Siege Ballista build uses, of course, like I said, Iron Commander, which gives you a totem per 200 dexterity. So in this build, we shoot for at least 600 dexterity with an optimal 800 dexterity and a potential 1000 dexterity, but that's even harder to get. But somewhere between 600 to 800 dexterity is good. Now, at 600 dexterity, you have 4 totems, and at 800 dexterity, you have 5 totems. So this would be the number that I would shoot for. If you can't get to 800, I wouldn't even bother with it. Of course, there are some other aspects of this build where you can make an argument for having 700 dexterity or 750, but when it comes to breakpoints for getting another totem, you just need to make sure that you either have 600 or 800. But as I said, this is an elemental version of Siege Ballista. A lot of people have played Siege Ballista in its poison version before because poison was really good and it just synergized pretty well with it. But unfortunately now, with poison being so gutted, it's not really so much of a thing. Previously, also, when I played it, with the elemental version was a version that did focus a little bit more on lightning damage. I used the support gem added lightning. I also used Wrath and a Herald of Thunder, and it worked out pretty well. But lightning, unfortunately, suffers from some inconsistencies when it comes to its huge damage range. And then with the changes to elemental status ailments, this is something that you would struggle to get good shocks on, especially for high health targets. You know, I'm talking anything that's maybe tier 14 or higher. And this build, as of right now, I guarantee will be able to do tier 14, tier 15, and Guardians pretty comfortably once you get it geared properly. But the lightning version still works. You could still do that lightning version, but even with the lightning version, you would still actually have quite a bit of cold damage. You would actually use both added cold and added lightning, so you would shock and shatter, which is fine. But there have been some changes, some additions to the game since 2.2, since I played this, that have pushed me into a full cold version of this build. And I think a full cold version has easier access to its maximum potential, while a lightning version could have ultimately the best DPS. But I think a lightning version is going to be considerably more difficult than a cold version, and you know, I'm gonna talk about that in this video. But let's just talk about the changes since 2.2. So first off, Wise Oak has been added to the game. Wise Oak being a very good DPS, elemental DPS flask, and it's affordable. It gives you a decent amount of penetration. It's just really good. We also have the addition of Primeval Force, which is the cluster just to the right of lethality in the bottom southeast corner of the passive tree. Primeval Force gives you a lot of elemental damage with attacks, and it also gives you some elemental damage penetration. We've also had the addition of Shaper's Touch. Now, this is something that people have definitely used before, and it makes sense with a build like this where you're stacking dexterity, because even at 600 dexterity, Shaper's Touch gives you 150 health. Now, this is not as meaningful now with the addition of new rare items that could, you know, potentially get up to 120 health. But once you get to that 700 plus dexterity range, that's when your Shaper's Touch are starting to give you 170, 200 health. that's a part of the that's a part of where I say you can make an argument of only having 740 dexterity, because they're just giving you more and more health as you get more and more dexterity. But Shaper's Touch, they're just really good. And on top of that, the other stats on Shaper's Touch also work out pretty well for you. You're getting mana for strength, and you're casting your Siege Ballistas on mana, which helps your mana regen as well. And then you're also getting percent evasion based off of your intelligence, which again, also pretty good because we are a evasion-based character for the most part. The other thing was in 3.0, there's actually a buff to added cold damage. In fact, there's a buff to both added cold and added lightning, in which they're both made more comparable to added chaos damage, because added chaos damage had the highest amount of base damage added, and both of them now are considerably stronger. In fact, added cold got a 35% more damage increase at level 20. So this is pretty substantial for this. Ice Bite got changed in 3.0 as well to now grant you flat added cold damage, and it gives you cold damage based off of how many frenzy charges you have, or flat damage per frenzy charge. And with this build, we are maintaining our frenzy charges. So again, this is just another direct buff to Siege Ballista. There's been some other things. Winter Spirit was added to the game. This is just to the left of lethality in the southeast corner of the passive tree. Winter Spirit converts 40% of your physical damage to cold damage. Now, it also gives you cold damage on the tree. If you are getting more and more dexterity, you're going to get more and more physical damage added to your Siege Ballistas. You don't have that much, but it actually does work out pretty well and gives you a pretty nice DPS boost. There are some other little things too. These weren't necessarily added to 3.0 or added in 3.0 or since 2.2, but you also have Fangs of Frost right next to Point Blank, which Point Blank is a passive that I've always been on the fence about before, but at this point I've actually kind of started to value Point Blank over King of the Hill. And when you are firing so many projectiles with so many ballistas, you're just gonna knock back any target a lot because you have a pretty high crit chance. But I would rather just get the damage off King of the Hill and not even worry about positioning my totems in any way to try to corner something or whatever. I would rather just put my totems right next to a target and just have them benefit from Point Blank always. And then with Fangs of Frost right there, it's even more reason. I would just rather take Fangs of Frost over King of the Hill, both of which are 3 points, but Fangs of Frost gives you 8% cold penetration and a fair bit of cold damage with attacks. Now, and just a little comparison too, in 2.2, a lot of people, myself included, would try to stretch all the way up to the assassin or the shadow part of the tree and grab, I forgot what it's called, Arcing Blows. And Arcing Blows, it was just too far out of the reach for the passive tree. You just couldn't stretch that far without sacrificing other things. But Fangs of Frost is in a really good place on the passive tree to work with this build as it is now. Also, since we're going full cold, we can start to use things like Frost Bomb, which Frost Bomb is 20% reduced cold resistances. This is not penetration, so it is I don't want to say it's better than penetration, but it works well with penetration and it stacks really well. And you don't have to worry about any sort of boss effectiveness or boss curse effectiveness, which if you were to use Frostbite or Elemental Weakness, ultimately you have to consider the fact that they have curse effectiveness on them, but you're getting the full benefit out of Frost Bomb. And then the last thing that I'm actually doing in this build that makes it a little unique is I am using Malachi's Artifice, the unique ring that makes it to where a socketed gem has elemental equilibrium at essentially 75% effectiveness. It's worded that it's 25% reduced effectiveness, but you get the point. But this essentially means that my Flame Golem, which is socketed in this is giving me the percent increased damage, essentially, which is WED, which works with my cold damage. And then also, whenever it hits a target, it is going to be inflicting elemental equilibrium at 75% effectiveness, which equates to about -37 cold or lightning resist, which is pretty good because this is also not penetration, this is reduction. So this stacks incredibly well. Overall, Siege Ballista has just gotten stronger in 3.0 with all these changes, all these things. Once you start to combine them together, you get a very strong build, and you get the benefit of shattering so much. On top of that, because of the way elemental status ailments were changed, I have a feeling you're kind of just better off using a Val Lightning Trap if you ever want to achieve shocking. You know, if you ever are, you know, doing those high health targets or Guardians or Shaper, you could just now use Val Lightning Trap in order to get the benefit from shocking without even shocking. So I just see little reason to go lightning damage right now, especially because with the cold version, I am only using Herald of Ice and Grace, which gives me a lot of evasion. I'm currently using the Skin of the Loyal, which was an affordable 6-link, and it gives me 100% increased global defenses, which works out pretty well when you are using Grace and you are using evasion-based gear. So if you want to check out the build, you could come to my stream at twitch.tv/wabacha. I'll be playing it probably, I think I'll probably be playing it the remainder of the league, because the last time I played this build seriously, I got to level 95, and I want to try to get higher and push higher than level 95. I'm going to be playing this build as a champion. You could obviously play this build as a raider if you wanted. I'm just going champion because I really like the fact that you get that permanent fortify, and that works out pretty well. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments down below, and I look forward to seeing you guys. See you later.